I'm glad you brought in the issue of Tanzania and Kenya because it's something I always try to compare. If you look at when we got independence from a Kenyan perspective and a Tanzanian perspective, Kenya, if you were to put it in a blanket, our first president, if you may, Jomo Kenyatta went into what you could call the capitalistic sort of mindset, right? So it was more of we are going into the British system where we want to bring a lot more investors in the country, and then they can invest on what we have. And then Mwalimu went into what he called African socialism, the Ujamaa way of sort of bringing people together so that they can work, and then everything they get, they can also eat together. From your perspective, then, what is the best? Is there? Do we have to choose in terms of capitalism versus socialism, or is there a system that Africans can actually choose to better sort of give them better results? Because these systems, it seems that they are not working for either of the two parties.
You know, if you go to Namanga, for those who don't know Namanga, that's the border town between Kenya and Tanzania. Usually, if you're going to Arusha from Nairobi, you've got to go through Namanga. Now, if you go to that highway from Namanga all the way to Nairobi, like the first 50, 60 kilometers from the Tanzanian border, you will easily observe a phenomena that vindicates Mwalimu Julius Nyerere's approach, although it's now being messed up by current administration in Tanzania. But it is so strong that my hope is that people would then tell themselves that there must be something here that we can look into. Now, that phenomena is this. You will observe a lot of trucks, big or small, bringing food into Kenya from Tanzania. Anybody should go, and that's exactly what you'll observe. Now, when a lot of those trucks go back to Tanzania, they are empty. They are not carrying any food now to Tanzania. What that tells you, what Kenyans do not know, and they should know today, is that a lot of the food they consume, those onions that you slice in your kitchen to make kachumbari or to make, whatever gravy you're having, a lot of them are from Tanzania. Lots of the food that you consume right here in Kenya is from Tanzania. Now, you've got to then ask yourself the question, does Kenya really need to be importing onions? Because the climatic conditions and the topographical conditions of Tanzania are pretty much like Kenya's. And Kenya, although smaller than Tanzania, is still a massive, huge country, pretty huge country. So why then is it that Kenya is in a place where it has to import a number of these vegetables from Tanzania? Of course, it's great for Tanzania. I'm not saying that we shouldn't trade. In fact, Africa has to trade a lot with each other. And, I am a lot more happy. There is no comparison with importing onions from Tanzania than wheat from Russia, This one is fine, and that's really food sovereignty also. But the point then I'm making there is that we have to then ask ourselves the question, what was it about this African socialism that seems to be helping Tanzania to produce more optimally than Kenya is, at least agriculturally speaking? And one direct answer to that question is this. The collective approach to agriculture in Tanzania is a win-win scenario for the people of Tanzania, for the farmers in Tanzania, because that collective approach doesn't work as well in Kenya precisely because capitalism is a Trojan horse that, yes, it came and there's all this talk of free market and everything, but it is not free market if we have to import the rice that we consume. If we even have to sometimes during crazy hunger import maize, corn, so-called corn from the US, that's not food sovereignty. Yes, it is capitalism. Yes, it is free market economy, but at the expense of these smallholders, you see. So we have to systematically dismantle these inherently destructive components of capitalism that have actually worked against the smallholders, which is why today there's a very dangerous trend that is ongoing in Kenya and a number of other countries of huge multinational bodies and foundations making the argument that we have to do away with the smallholder approach. We have to then go to the large-scale modes of farming, because in capitalism, it's all about the profits. The bottom line is the profits. So the same way that we looked at our land and said that recharging this land for a couple of months means less returns, and capitalism doesn't like that, because capitalism wants to say that this year you produced 50 sacks of maize, the following year you produced 60 sacks, the following year you produced 70. Because when that happens, it means that the profits are higher and higher. That's all capitalism cares about. But when you begin to dismantle that, then what we are saying is that how can we help the smallholders to still build a critical mass of agricultural produce? So that, yes, in my farm I may only produce 3 sacks of mung beans, and you may only produce 3 sacks, but maybe 100 of us producing 3 sacks and consuming 1 sack means that we have 200 sacks. And now we can get an optimal price for that. Even better, we can add value to this as a cooperative. So this cooperative approach is already strong in Tanzania because it is in the DNA of the country. And they have to build on that a lot, because the warning signal that we can give Tanzania is if they continue fleeing from that foundation in the name of more profits, then they'll simply begin having more and more food security at the expense of food sovereignty, and even that food security will creep towards food insecurity. You see? So we really need to have that conversation, and we must agitate for policies that look at the smallholder farmer in this country, on this continent, as a king and as a queen. Because after all, majority of Africans are fed by smallholders. Yeah, we are not fed by any large farms, but by these smallholders. We just have to help them to have a more cooperative approach when it comes to optimal produce, so that if they are increasingly also earning decent livelihoods from this farming, simply because we took greater control of our food system, then it's a win-win.